On the radar with the CBS 17 Storm Team.
Welcome to On the Radar, your weekly look at our weather world, exclusively here on CBS 17 Plus. I'm Wes Hohenstein.
I'm meteorologist Rachel Duensing. Wes, we are so excited to bring this to the wonderful watchers and listeners of CBS 17 Plus. Why don't you tell us what we've got going on today?
Yeah, normally we get 3 minutes to talk about weather on the news every day, Rachel. We've got 30 minutes to talk about a lot of stuff. Severe weather has been making big headlines here in North Carolina, specifically hail. We're going to look at that hail and how it forms. We're going to go one-on-one with the Deputy Director of the National Hurricane Center. And we just finished up with Earth Day. We're going to talk about some of the climate changes here in our state, and we're going to go to outer space. We had a pretty significant anniversary this week. A lot packed in to this show, our inaugural one.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, we only get 3 minutes. Hopefully we don't go over the 30 minutes that they've allotted us today. So we want to get right to it. A lot of people have been already thinking about this year's upcoming hurricane season. Hurricane season, of course, starts June 1st. We mentioned that we had the opportunity to sit down virtually with the Deputy Director of the National Hurricane Center, Jamie Rome. Had a lot of things to talk about with him, but I also wanted to ask him what he thinks, or at least what the National Hurricane Center thinks about what they expect for the upcoming season. Here's part of that interview.
Well, NOAA doesn't release its seasonal forecast until later in May, May 22nd to be precise. And the reason for that is the predictability of the season so early. We're just in April. There's limits of predictability this far out in time. So while there are a couple of things we're watching to see if they continue into the season, it's really a bit early to say anything specific about the upcoming season.
Yep, absolutely. So for us here in North Carolina, Tropical Storm Debbie and, of course, Hurricane Helene were the biggest storms for us. What do you remember most about those storms, especially Hurricane Helene?
Yeah, Helene is yet another example of how it's all about the hazards, meaning it's all about where it rains, where the wind blows strongest, where the storm surge goes. And it's not about the center of circulation. It's not about where the center moves. Yet people are infatuated with that, where the center moves. And so we have to double down on our communication strategy to help people to stop focusing so much on the center, where the center goes in the Saffir-Simpson scale, because these can lead to, be misleading and lead to disastrous outcomes.
And I'm sure when it comes to a storm like Helene, obviously it was a major hurricane by the time it made landfall, but like we were talking about, by the time it impacted North Carolina, it wasn't that major hurricane, but people, I don't know if they underestimated the impacts because of that. So what is it like forecasting for a storm like Helene, where there are significant impacts felt so far inland?
It's kind of like, have you ever had that dream where you're screaming, for help, or you're screaming to get someone's attention and no one can hear you, and that anxiety that you feel? In a case like Helene, you can see it developing. You can see a disaster unfolding, a couple days in advance. These storms aren't unpredictable, but the ability to communicate, the ability to say things in ways that resonates with people, because you're fighting a narrative. So the narrative that you're fighting with Helene is it's been downgraded, right? It was a major hurricane and now it's weakened. It's been downgraded. To the average person, this feels like the threat has diminished or lessened. The other thing you're fighting is this reliance on the Saffir-Simpson scale. So, it was a category 4 or it was a 5 or whatever, and now it's only a tropical storm. And people, they drop their guard, they drop their attention, and trying to help people to understand, 30, 40 inches of rain dumped on the mountains, wherever that might be, is going to be a once in a lifetime disastrous event. That's hard. That's really, really hard to communicate. It's hard to communicate that rain is life threatening because we see rain every day. So these are some of the things we're just going to have to fight through over the next couple seasons.
So going along with that, you said it's challenging to sort of get that communication across, and it absolutely is. But how do you think that you as the National Hurricane Center, as well as us as those in the media who are helping to relay your life-saving information, how do you think we can best communicate that going forward?
To be a calm, clear voice. When I talk to citizens and residents, the one thing that I hear time and time again is they're being flooded, absolutely flooded with information, different forecasts, differing opinions, in some cases, excess hype, fear. These types of things are causing people to shut down. They're unable to process the information by the time the hurricane or tropical storm gets to them, because people have been talking about it for 10 days with all the hype and all the speculation. So by the time the storm actually threatens, people are exhausted, just literally, exhausted, and they can't listen anymore. So by maintaining sort of this calm, clear, informative approach and empowering people to take the right steps, I think is where we need to be.
So there's obviously a lot to unpack in that interview with Jamie Rome, the deputy director of the National Hurricane Center. You can hear it in his voice, and if you've ever met Jamie or even just had a chance to talk to him virtually like we did, he's very passionate about what he does at the Hurricane Center, which is why he's now deputy director. And a lot of what he was talking about was focusing on the impacts. Everyone gets obsessed with, is it a Category 4, is it a Category 5, how strong is it? When we know all too well with, Hurricane Florence in 2019, that weakened to a Category 1 by the time it made landfall on our coast, and we still had devastating impacts, and Helene was no different, Wes.
Yeah, Florence, a lot of rain. What stuck out to me is he said, hard to convince people rain is life-threatening. Florence dropped more than 30 inches of rain. Flooding, big problem because water's heavy. It can move people and cars and houses, and that's what stuck out to me. And, we love Jamie here in North Carolina because he went to NC State both for his undergrad and his master's. So he always has Carolina on his mind when he's down there in Miami forecasting for hurricanes, and that always it makes me feel good. Both him and the director have North Carolina ties, so we always know that they're watching out for us here in the Carolinas.
Yeah, and this is only the first part of the interview that we have with Jamie Rome. In a second part, a little bit later on, he's going to talk about how North Carolina inspired him to get involved in hurricane forecasting, but also he's going to talk about what it was about Helene that was so devastating. And obviously, we all lived that, especially our friends and family in the mountains. They dealt with it firsthand. So he's going to dive a little bit more into that as well, in addition to talking about, again, how North Carolina just sort of inspired his career at the National Hurricane Center. But, switching gears a little bit, we all want to think about hurricane season. It's still, almost a month away now. We just had something else that we celebrated. I guess we could say celebrated just a couple of days ago.
Yeah, we're supposed to celebrate Earth Day every April 22nd. The first one was back in 1970. So this is 55 years of Earth Days. It's a great time to raise awareness about the challenges that our planet faces, and since we live on the planet, we got to care about it. Hopefully more than once a year, but this is the time of year that we try to focus on that.
Yeah, and the first Earth Day was official in 1970, so that's been, like you mentioned, it's been going on for a little while now. And that first Earth Day, 20 million people participated, 20 million Americans, I should say, participated in that first Earth Day celebration, and it brought about a lot of the environmental protection acts that we have now, and that help keep our environment a little more safe and a little more healthy for all of us. It all started because of Earth Day, which is so amazing that, people were finally like, hey, it's time for us to really help out our Earth.
Yeah, we all get birthdays, days to celebrate, anniversaries, and the planet should have one too. We've gathered a lot of data over the years, though, about what's happening to our planet, and unfortunately, a lot of it revolves around the warming of our planet.
Yeah, we've got some data to show that.
Yeah,
as well.
So let's talk about that.
Yeah, for sure. So as we check out just how our temperatures have changed over the past few years, you see it in the graphic there. I mean, since 1970, which was when, again, that first Earth Day was celebrated, I guess, so to speak, North Carolina, the state of North Carolina, has warmed almost 3 degrees since then. And Raleigh, in particular, has warmed more than 4 degrees. I mean, you think, a lot of people think, oh, 4 degrees, it's not a big deal, but it makes an impact even if we don't feel it right away.
And the main reason why our planet, why our state, why our area has been warming is because the extra greenhouse gases that have been put into the atmosphere. And unfortunately, it's us that put these greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And I always tell people, greenhouse gases aren't all bad. Sure, it's warming us up probably a little too much, but greenhouse gases also keep us from plummeting overnight 60, 70, 80 degrees. I mean, without greenhouse gases, we would be so cold at night that this planet would have a lot more ice on it, couldn't grow stuff, it wouldn't be good. So there's some good, but we have put too much carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and that traps heat, and that just keeps warming us up, and that's why Earth Day is a great time to talk about how we can reverse those trends and what the impacts are.
Yeah, and the United States has kind of had the same trend that North Carolina has, where since 1970 they've warmed just about 3 degrees. But obviously it does kind of vary from location to location. The state in the U.S., obviously, that has warmed the most since 1970 is Alaska. They've warmed, I'm double checking some notes here, 4.3 degrees since 1970. In Alaska, I mean, that's significant. It's 4 degrees is obviously significant here in Raleigh. But you think about Alaska and, certain communities that are so, how do I want to say, tied to sort of the cold weather and all of that is up there. I mean, 4.3 degrees is a lot.
Yeah. And, this is Earth Day. It's about the whole planet. And we talk about how the globe is warming. But there are impacts that hit us right here in North Carolina. Let's talk about a few of those. And we've mentioned these before, but in our state, think about it. If we're warmer, what are some of the things that happen? The growing season is longer and allergy season is longer.
Oh, yeah. We feel that every spring.
Yeah. Mosquito season is going to be longer. And we hate mosquitoes in the summer. Well, if there's more warm temperatures, they're going to be around earlier in the spring and later in the fall. If we have warmer temperatures, we're not going to have as much snow up in the mountains, and that's less fun to go skiing and sledding, and that's less jobs for our friends in Western North Carolina. And this is something I talk about a lot. I am the bookkeeper, the checkbook in my family, and we write that check in the summertime for higher and higher electric bills, and it hits us all in the pocketbook. So those are ways that a warmer planet impacts us here in North Carolina. So this is the time of year where we all got to kind of take a step back and say, hey, we got to fix this problem somehow.
Yeah, and I remember talking to a climate scientist even here locally, and it's always the battle of, if it kind of happens subtly, you don't always realize that it's happening. And so she always tells people to go to the museum and see when Pullen Park was iced over and people were ice skating on Pullen Park.
Yeah.
You can't really do that now. I always tell people, well, how many snow days did you have as a kid? How many do the kids have now? And it is quite a bit different. And so again, sometimes we don't always, because we've been living it every day, we don't notice it because it seems subtle, but it's not as subtle as we think, and things have changed quite a bit, especially over the last 50 to 60 years, not just here in the U.S., but across the entire world as well.
Yeah. All right, well, let's tie a bow on Earth Day. Earth Day, April 22nd, 1970. Rachel, a week and a half before that, something else big happened in our country. It was the launch of Apollo 13. And that anniversary 55 years ago just happened. And we have the video from CBS of that launch day back in 1970. So as we go to break, let's take a look at that launch. This was Jim Lovell, Fred Hayes, and Jack Swigert launching aboard Apollo 13. Of course, it became a lot more famous years later because of the movie starring Tom Hanks. And unfortunately, the mission itself became famous because of a ruptured oxygen tank that turned their hopeful moon landing into a rescue mission. So this is the anniversary of that. And I'll finish with this little fun fact. We always hear people say, Houston, we have a problem. That was not the actual quote when they realized something was going wrong 55 years ago. The actual real quote to Space Center in Houston was, okay, Houston, we've had a problem here.
It doesn't sound as good,
It doesn't. But Tom Hanks, they used that in the movie, and we all use it when something bad goes wrong at the office or at home. Houston, we have a problem. Not actually the way it happened, but that is our first segment here on the Radar. We'll be back with much more right after this.
On the radar with the CBS 17 Storm Team.
And thanks for staying with us here on The Radar. I'm Wes Hohenstein along with Rachel Duensing. We continue to dive deep into weather across our area, state, country, and the world. And we've got some interesting severe weather to talk about here in just a second, but we're going to continue our conversation with the Deputy Director of the National Hurricane Center, Rachel.
Yeah, so again, we want to check back in with Jamie Rome, again, the Deputy Director, as Wes just mentioned. He's going to talk a little bit more about why Helene was such a devastating storm for us, especially here in North Carolina, and of course, how North Carolina inspired his journey to the National Hurricane Center. Here's the rest of that interview. What about Helene made it so devastating for those of us in the mountains?
Well, so, it's moving ashore really fast. So people tend to focus on intensity. In a case like this, the storm's moving inland fast. So even though it's weakening, and let's say it's weakening at about the same rate as normal, if it's moving fast, it can carry those winds farther inland. So that's one thing. The other thing is when you superimpose mountains with hurricanes or even the remnants of hurricanes, it's going to be a bad outcome in almost every situation, because either the mountains are going to enhance the wind, in the form of really high wind gusts like we saw in Helene, or they're going to enhance the rainfall, or you're going to get both. And that's what happened in Helene. The orographic acceleration, the orographic impacts really took a bad situation and made it quite horrific.
Yeah, unfortunately, we've all experienced that in some way or another. What is the National Hurricane Center working on this year in terms of new products, or how are you best trying to communicate things this year?
So we're continuing this slow and steady march towards communicating the hazards and shifting away from the cone. We're going to have a second year experimentation with the new version of the cone, which has the inland winds portrayed on top of it. We're also adding, for the first time ever, a new dedicated graphic on rip currents to help highlight that risk, because shockingly, rip currents is one of the biggest causes of death in hurricanes.
And it always seems like it's these quote-unquote hidden dangers that are the most deadly, whether it's inland flooding or flash flooding or even these rip currents, which goes back to our conversation before about communication. So we talked about changes to the cone. There's talk before of improvements or adding new planes to the Hurricane Hunter fleet. Is that still happening? And if it does happen, how will that help improve forecasting?
So that's in the out year. So that's not this year, but in future years, we are looking to expand and modernize our Hurricane Hunter fleet aircraft. This is going to give us better flexibility, better ability to probe these hurricanes and find out what's going on the inside, so that we can improve our forecast. But that's not going to be this season. We'll have our existing a fleet of aircraft this season.
So in addition to the cone changes, are there any other products that the National Hurricane Center will be focusing on for this season?
Yeah, we're also going to be working on improving our lead time, which is something we've been working on for, 10 or 15 years, just this gradual improvement in lead time to give communities more awareness. And specifically for this season, we're going to increase the lead time of systems that have not yet developed. We call these potential tropical cyclones, systems that have not yet developed but are forming really, really close to land, such that we can give people more advance notice.
All right, I see behind you, you have the preparedness graphic. So as we get closer and closer to the official start of hurricane season, what do you really want to drive home to people that they should keep in mind when it comes to preparedness?
So, for many people, they've nailed the basics of hurricane supplies and non-perishable food, water, this sort of thing. But I really need people to take that next step. We are a society that is completely dependent on our cell phones and power. And both of those are lost in the aftermath of a natural disaster, in many cases, days or weeks. So think to yourself, what are you going to do to weather that event from a loss of communication and a loss of power?
Alrighty, and then one last thing, a little bit of a personal question. You obviously went to NC State. Were there any experiences during your time living in North Carolina, going to school here, any sort of hurricane memories that stick out to you?
Obviously, Bertha and Fran are big ones from when I was there. But I spent a lot of time on the Outer Banks, North Carolina, and experienced my fair share of storms, and it's what shaped my love of not only the weather, but of storm surge, which ultimately culminated in my career here.
Yeah, because you are also the director of the storm surge unit. Is that correct?
It was a former job. So I ran the storm surge unit for about 12 years. Now deputy director for the National Hurricane Center. But yeah, my time in North Carolina really shaped my interests and love of science, and it drove me straight here to hurricanes.
We love that personal tie from Jamie Rome, again, the Deputy Director of the National Hurricane Center. Again, just straight up stating that, spending time in North Carolina helped inspire his journey to the National Hurricane Center. And something he mentioned in there specifically, not just the storm surge, but rip currents, kind of these hidden dangers that we don't always think about. And the National Hurricane Center trying to better communicate that to folks. Even if a hurricane's not making landfall, it can still really churn up the water enough to cause some impacts.
And think of it, hurricanes hit in the summer when everyone's at the beach vacationing, and most of those people don't go to the beach very often, and here comes this hurricane producing rip currents, and they don't know how to handle it, and that's how people end up drowning and unfortunately getting killed. But we hate to miss our vacations on the beach, but we got to leave the beach when a hurricane comes.
Yeah, you have to be safe. And alrighty, so what can we expect this year? Obviously, Jamie Rome mentioned that they're not releasing their official forecast until later on in May, but we already have a bit of an idea of what's happening, Wes. Let's go ahead and talk about that.
Yeah, so April's when we start to get the first hurricane forecast for the upcoming season. The first one was from Colorado State. They've been doing it for more than 40 years. Their numbers were 17, 9, and 4. And the three main numbers we look at are named storms, hurricanes, and major hurricanes, category 3 or higher. The averages, which is always a good number to look at so you can compare what this season's going to be, the average is 14, 7, and 3. So Colorado State, 17, 9, and 4, little bit above average. And then most recently, the meteorologist at North Carolina State University, Jamie Rome's alma mater, are saying 12 to 15 named storms, 6 to 8 hurricanes, 2 to 3 major hurricanes. So a little bit under what Colorado State has, but it's about average and it's less than last year. So that's what we try to do when we see these numbers. We compare to averages, compared to what we've had in recent history.
Yeah, and a big part of what goes into this forecast, obviously, water temperatures are, again, running warmer than average. What sort of El Nino, La Nina phase are we going to be in? Right now it's looking neutral, which isn't quite as easily predictable when it comes to what kind of impact it has on hurricane season, but also the West African monsoon has a big impact as well. So over the next few weeks, we're really going to get a much better idea of what to expect. But even though we're all thinking about hurricane season, we've had some pretty feisty storms here lately, Wes, including some that dropped some decent-sized hail over in Chatham County. So we want to take a little bit of time to learn about that. And fortunately, our own meteorologist, Dave Downey, has a really great explainer on that. So we'll go ahead and go to that.
Some pretty crazy video photos coming out of the hailstorm yesterday that moved through the triangle, something we don't see very often here. We had hail reported up to ping pong ball size in northwestern Chatham County. That's 1.5 inches in diameter, rare anywhere, but particularly rare here in North Carolina. Let's talk about why it is rare to get hail here in the Tar Heel State. Let's go under the hood, zoom into the cloud here. We've got these water droplets that are frozen above a certain layer in the atmosphere. We'll come back to that layer here in a second. These droplets, which become hail, become bigger each time it's swept up and down above the freezing level, where it's 32 degrees up in the cloud. If you literally cut a hailstone in half, it looks like an onion because it does this process repeatedly, forming additional layers each time it gets swept up and down in the cloud. Eventually, the hailstone gets too big. The updraft, the storm's engine, the updraft, can't sustain it anymore, and it eventually falls, boom, out of the cloud. In the summer, the freezing level is too high. It's just too warm in the atmosphere, and it's a lower hail chance when we have a higher freezing level in the cloud. This is the craziest part. Look at how fast the storm's engine, the updraft, was yesterday to produce ping pong ball size hail, 60 miles per hour going up into the clouds. Just goes to show the intense power of Mother Nature. Dave Downey, CBS 17 News.
So again, we had ping pong ball-sized hail, which is big for us, but the biggest hailstone ever recorded in the United States was in July of 2010 in South Dakota, and it was 8 inches in diameter. So 8 inches in diameter, think of an average male hand. I mean, that's bigger than my hand fully extended. It weighed almost 2 pounds.
Jeez.
And they've actually been able to save it. It is in a freezer at the National Center of Atmospheric Research in Boulder, Colorado. I don't know if they let people see it or if you can chip off a piece and put it in your drink, but that kind of size ice, think about that, hitting you on the head, hitting your car, hitting your roof.
Yeah.
Lots of problems there, and thankfully we rarely see hail that big. But Rachel, I don't even want to think about something that big.
I don't either. And kind of like what Dave was alluding to in his explainer, think about how strong the winds in that storm had to be to even lift that hailstone up that many times to get that big and that heavy before it eventually fell out of the sky. So yeah, I don't want to think about that. That's definitely the kind of hail that I don't want to kind of bring this down, but I feel like if that hit you in the head, it would knock you unconscious
wouldn't
at
feel
the
good.
best.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, if you think about a ping pong ball,
Yeah.
it's really light, and you're not talking about something that's that light. It's solid ice, and it would hurt.
Yeah.
It would hurt. All right, let's finish on a brighter note. Literally, every night on the 11 o'clock news, I ask our viewers to send us their best sunset and sunrise picture. I call it Super Sunsets. So we will finish today with those. This is from the past week. We will start here in Wake County, down at Harris Lake, where the nuclear power plant is. Randall captured a super sunset. From there, let's go somewhere a little more tropical, to the Bahamas. John was there back in March. That is a super sunset. He was on a cruise. And so was Bob. Our next one actually is just off the Galapagos Islands.
Man.
Bob, who normally lives in Moore County, was vacationing there. He took this picture while he was passing the equator. And keeping it tropical, Paul was in St. Martin, not with a sunset, with a super sunrise earlier this year. And we will finish in our own backyard. Our buddy Veronica was up early capturing this super sunrise in Durham. If you have super sunset or sunrise pictures, I love to show them every night on the CBS 17 News at 11. Just drop me an email to sendit@cbs17.com. And that is it for this week's episode of On the Radar. It's our weekly look at what's on our radar and what we want to put on your radar. Thanks so much for joining us for this first episode. I'm Wes Hohenstein.
I'm meteorologist Rachel Duensing. Of course, if you have something you want us to talk about, put on your radar, someone else's radar, again, send us an email. We would love to feature that on our next episode. So for Wes and for myself and the entire CBS 17 Storm team, we hope you have a fantastic day.